Yes, dietary guidelines. The new dietary guidelines are out. They come out every 5 years. Here is the new one to take us through to 2030. The dietary guidelines for Americans, issued by the US Department of Agriculture, but they're not really just for Americans because, let's face it, the rest of the world follows America, and most countries in the world have dietary guidelines that are very much based on the guidelines that originally came out of America. So this is for all of us. Everybody with a channel on YouTube, anybody who's got anything to do with health or nutrition is looking at this and giving their comment. So here's my take on it. And generally speaking, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. And that's a good mark. That's a pretty good mark. It's definitely not a 10. And I'm going to talk you through the things that I think are really positive in here and the areas where I think it could be tightened up and tweaked in future versions. And I'll give you my thinking and my reasoning, and you can, of course, decide for yourself what you think. So, welcome to SHAPEFIXER. I'm Andrew. I am a nutritionist. I'm also a sportsman and have a particular interest, obviously, then in health and fitness. And, well, let's get on with it, shall we? On my monitor, this looks like it's mirrored. It looks like it's back to front. If it is, I'll fix it. I'll edit it. I don't know if that's recording like that or if it's just my camera. All right, never mind that. Okay, so where are we? It's a pyramid, okay, but it's inverted. So instead of having a pyramid with the foods we need to eat most of at the bottom, the foods we need to eat most of are now at the top, and the pyramid is upside down, which seems a bit of a weird thing, but I actually get it, because there is a statement being made here about taking the previous guidelines, the original pyramid, and literally turning it on its head. And in many ways, that is exactly what has happened. It's probably long overdue from a lot of aspects, but let's go through them and let's see what they're all about here. Right, now, you will notice in this picture, there are no breakfast cereals. I think that's a good start. Anyway, that's a detail. Okay, so let's go through it and let's look at the introductory message on the first page. And I'm going to read out a couple of points here that I think are absolutely excellent and set the tone for what we can expect to get from the document. Now, there are other comments and quotes in here that I find less helpful, and I will get to them later on at the end. But listen to this. Nearly 90% of healthcare spending, this is in America, goes to treating people who have chronic diseases. Most of these illnesses are the predictable result of the standard American diet, which over time has become reliant on highly processed foods coupled with a sedentary lifestyle. I think that's a fantastic statement because that is absolutely true. More than 70% of American adults are overweight or obese. And here, really scary, nearly 1 in 3 American adolescents between the ages of 12 and 17 has pre-diabetes. Now, some of them have actual full-blown diabetes, but 1 in 3 young teenagers are already pre-diabetic. Terrible. For decades, federal incentives have promoted low-quality, highly processed foods and pharmaceutical intervention instead of prevention. And that is true as well. And we've done videos on that. That we eat bad food and we couple it with medication and we think that makes it okay. And we've been told that that makes it okay. And it doesn't make it okay. So this document is setting itself out to try and address those issues to make us eat better food so that we have less reliance on medication and we prevent these illnesses in the first place. So that's setting the groundwork, okay? We can shift our food system away from chronic disease towards nutrient density, nourishment, resilience, and long-term health. Okay, so let's go into the document itself and see to what extent the messaging in here actually does chime with those stated aims. Now, the main emphasis on this document is an emphasis away from highly processed food to unprocessed whole foods with an emphasis on proteins and fats. And that is excellent because whole, natural, unprocessed foods are generally healthier for you across the board than highly processed versions with chemical additives and added sugars. And an emphasis on proteins and fats rather than the historical emphasis on carbohydrates is also much better because proteins and fats are building blocks and they are essential, and carbohydrates are not. They're not essential and they're not building blocks. So this is a really good change. Now, carbohydrates are hardly even mentioned in this document, other than to say that we should be avoiding sugars, which is very good. And it also does say here, when it talks about protein, consume meat with no or limited refined carbohydrates or starches. Now that is really saying that when you eat your meat, don't have pasta with it. Don't have bread with it. Eat the meat as it is and get the protein and the fat without the sugar, and you will absorb the protein and the fat much better. So that's good. It does literally doubles the recommended daily allowance of protein, which is fantastic because people are pretty undernourished, even though there's a weight problem. The weight problem is not overnourished. Weight is a different thing. That's a form of malnutrition. Mal meaning bad. It talks about healthy fats. So here we go on page 3. Healthy fats like meat, poultry, eggs, seafood, nuts, seeds, full fat dairy, olives and avocados. And talks about including butter or beef tallow in cooking. So there's quite an emphasis on animal fats here, which is good. There's no mention in this document of cholesterol, which I kind of wish they had gone as far as to say dietary cholesterol is irrelevant, because that's what all the research shows now, and that's what the medical associations have also acknowledged. But I understand why they've just left it out altogether, is because they don't trying not to be too antagonistic of the status quo, but at least it's been taken out as an issue. There are references to grains, advising people to focus on whole grains, and I would say that is aimed at people who are eating grains and are going to eat grains or grain-based products, is to then at least focus on the unprocessed high-fiber whole grains, because they are better than the processed starches. I don't think we should be eating grains at all, and anybody who follows this channel will know that and understand why, but that's not the point. So at least they're emphasizing whole grains rather than processed grains. They do recommend reducing alcohol. There is a mention of the importance of electrolytes, very important points. When it comes to specific diets, it's quite interesting. There is absolutely no mention in here whatsoever of a carnivore diet, and I understand, again, why not, because that will just antagonize a lot of people, and there's really no need for it, because when you talk about the foods that are important, the message sort of seeps through as you go through it, because they keep going back to the things they recommend you should eat, and ultimately you can see that a carnivore diet covers ticks most of those boxes. But there is a very specific mention of people on a vegetarian or a vegan diet. And this I find really encouraging, because it's very, very important. And we've spoken about it a lot on this channel, and I'm going to read it to you. Vegan diets show broad shortfalls in vitamins A, D, E, B6, B12, riboflavin, niacin, choline, calcium, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, zinc, and protein. And then goes on to recommend that if you're on a diet like this, you really need to take care of your supplementation and make sure you're taking all the right supplements. So there you have, almost in as many words, as saying that kind of diet, a plant-based diet, is not ideal, and a plant-only diet is really a deficient diet. Doesn't say anything about carnivores needing to take anything. What about ketogenic diets generally? Okay, so let's just come away from the vegan, which is at this end, and the carnivore, which is at this end, and go to the ketogenic diet, which is the low sugar diet. And you can have a ketogenic diet that is more animal based, or you can have one, you can be on a ketogenic diet as a vegetarian. And really, the only mention of a ketogenic diet is to say that individuals with certain chronic diseases may experience improved health outcomes when following a lower carbohydrate diet. Now, I find that statement a bit weak, because people who do not have chronic diseases will also benefit from a low carbohydrate diet because they won't get the disease in the first place. Okay, that's a bit like saying people who have been poisoned must stop taking the poison, but for the rest of us, we can carry on eating the poison because we're not sick yet. That's a bit weird. But at least it's better than not acknowledging the existence of a ketogenic diet, which was the problem with previous iterations or versions of the dietary guidelines. They are now recognizing a ketogenic or low carbohydrate diet as a thing and talking about it in a positive way. So I do think this is progress. Okay, what are the issues I have with this document? It's a great document really on the face of it, talking about whole foods, unprocessed foods, more protein, healthy fats, less sugar, less carbohydrate, trending towards animal products, alcohol, electrolytes, all those things. What are the things that I have issues with? All right. One of them is that there seems to be a lot of talk about fruit and eating fruit and whole fruit and natural fruit and not unprocessed fruit. That's all fine, but there's no mention of the fact that fruit is a vector for sugar. Fruit is generally very, very high in sugar. So when you're going to talk about sugar and not eating sugar, it's not just added sugars that are the problem. They just compound the problem. Sugars generally are a problem, and fruit is very high in sugar. Now, they do talk about fruit juice and suggesting that you drink it in moderation, whatever that means, but it does suggest on cutting down because of all the sugar in fruit juice. So the same would go for fruit. So I would want to see a bit more about that in a future version of this document. I have another problem where there is a reference to saturated fat and suggesting that saturated fat make up only 10% of our calorie intake. Now, firstly, there's no other mention of calories in here really, and what should your calorie intake be and how do you measure it, and the whole idea of calories has been pretty much debunked anyway. But to say that saturated fat should make up 10% of, I guess, your fat intake? I mean, how do you know that? But if you're talking about healthy fats and you're recommending meat and eggs and fish and butter, those are all saturated fat because they're from animal sources. So there's a bit of a disconnect or a bit of a contradiction there. But then it gets worse because they talk about healthy fat, and in the section on healthy fat, now this is what I really can't understand. In general, saturated fat consumption should not exceed 10%. Okay, so we mentioned that. Then says, more research is needed to determine which types of dietary fats support long-term health. Now, hang on a minute. You're telling people to eat healthy fats. You're telling people about these animal products that contain healthy fats. You're then saying not to have more than 10% of your calorie from saturated fat, which is the fat that comes from those so-called healthy fat foods. And then you're saying there's more research needed before we even know what fats are healthy and what fats are not. So it's a mishmash. It really is, but they've messed this one up a bit, I think. And again, I think that's because it's contentious, because there are agendas, and there was probably so much debate that they arrived at some kind of compromise where those in favor of saturated fat were allowed to have included in here that you should eat meat and eggs and fish and butter, and the ones who are against it wanted this bit in to say you shouldn't have more than 10%, and then to make everybody happy they said we still don't know which types of fats are healthy and which are not. So the whole section on fat is actually then just a little bit ridiculous. So I've got an issue with that. I have an issue with definitions. Now, the definition of healthy fat, clearly, they don't know what that means. They talk about servings from time to time, so many servings of something. I don't know what that means. What's a serving? Is that a bowl? Is that a handful? Is that an ounce? I mean, I don't know what that is. So a definition section would probably be a good idea for future documents. And then it talks a lot about what to eat, but nothing about how or when. And I get that they have got to limit the scope of the document at some point, but I do think it would be interesting to add a paragraph or two about the regularity of eating, because overeating is an issue. The issue isn't only what we eat, we also overeat. So if you had something about meals, the timing of meals, snacking, fasting, all those aspects of controlling your eating patterns, I think that would be quite a useful section to add. And then I have a final issue, and I really wasn't sure if I should talk about this, because I don't want to get into politics, and I'm not interested in politics, and this is not what this is about. But politics has been inserted into this document in a way that I think is really unfortunate, because you want a document like this to stand on its own 2 feet on the strength of its scientific credibility. And you want all people to take this seriously and understand that people around the world are going to be wanting to follow, are going to be looking at this as well, and into the future. So I think there are a few phrases in the introductory section which I just find unfortunate. I'm not judging one way or the other. I have no interest in American politics, apart from a curiosity interest to see what's going on. I'm not American. I don't live in America. I don't vote in America. It's got nothing to do with me. But I understand what's going on. And if you produce a document like this that you want everybody to believe and everybody to follow, as they clearly do, because they talk about how we can do all this together and every American needs to play their part, and it's probably not a good idea to put things like the Trump administration is working to ensure that all families can afford this. Why don't you just say the government? That's just silly. Under President Trump's leadership, no. Because you're going to upset the people who don't like him. And you're going to make them want to push back against it. And you're just inviting more acrimony and more argument and more reluctance to change the eating habits and get healthy. And this is what we want. We want people to follow this. I really do. And I just think that's not the cleverest. Those are not the cleverest things to put in a document like this. This document's going to 2030. Whatever happens, his term will be over 2 years before that. And then the logo, the slogan, "Make America Healthy Again," with capital MAHA, MAHA, "Make America Great Again." That sounds way too much like "Make America Great Again." "Make America Healthy Again" sounds like MAGA. And it'll appeal to a lot of people, but it will really annoy a lot of people. And again, it's just putting inflammatory political stuff, or stuff that could be interpreted in a political way, in what is supposed to be a scientific document, which detracts from the scientific impact that you really want this document to have. So I have a little bit of a problem with that. It's not the end of the world. You can see past it, you can read past it, and you can go to the science. Generally speaking, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10 because I think it is a good document. It covers most aspects. It turns the old pyramid on its head, which I think is wonderful, and it's a start. It's a start. There are more things that can be put in here. There are things that can be cleared up. But I think we're going in the right direction for the first time in probably 70 years or so, 60 years. So generally, I'm in favor of this document, and I think we can really work with this. Thank you for your time. Please subscribe to our channel. All the things that we talked about in this video, I have done videos on various aspects of nutrition and proteins and fats and sugars and supplements and all that stuff. So look at the videos on this channel, subscribe so you don't miss our new videos, and we'll see you back here very soon.